In this video, we have 6 chess tips to pole vault your game to the next level. And at the very end, we have a pattern to look at that shows you exactly how to win your opponent's queen. So here's the first tip. Place your queen behind a row of friendly pawns during the opening. We do the standard opening, the queen's pawn's out, knights are out, you get your bishop out and protected, and then you put a pawn to c4, and your opponent makes a move, you get your knight up to c3, and they castle, and you get your queen out to c2. You have your queen behind the knight, behind some friendly pawns. It's well protected, but it has visibility into a very important square at h7. Be a pretty simple way to take this knight, and then you could attack that pawn, etc., and possibly have a quick win. The next tip is to be sure and avoid trading a developed piece for an undeveloped piece. It's easy sometimes to get your piece where you could take an undeveloped piece. So here you have your bishop at f4 has visibility to that knight at b8. And so you could take that. And yes, it would cause the rook to go here and lose castling rights on that side. However, it's not likely they're going to castle on that side anyway because of those 2 pawns that are missing. Most likely, if they castle, they're going to castle on the king side. Nevertheless, you don't, because it's very valuable to have a piece that is in the game, in the battle, as opposed to one that hasn't gotten developed yet. The next chess tip is to castle as quickly as possible. Generally speaking, you would like to castle as quickly as possible. So you get your pieces out, and 3 knights are out, and you get your 4th knight out. You have your bishop threatening your opponent's knight here at f6, and then they move their pawn up because they would like their queen to protect that space if you take, etc. Nevertheless, you get your queen up, and once your queen is up, now you could castle on the queen's side. The king would move over too, and the knight would go on the other side of the king, etc. So that would give your bishop visibility to the game, give you a battery behind your queen immediately. So there's a lot of advantages to castling on the queen side. However, the idea of castling as quickly as possible, you'd get here. The next tip is castling on the king side is generally safer than castling on the queen side. So when you get your pieces out and you have your standard pieces, you want to get your bishop out before you move the d pawn up, so this bishop has visibility into your opponent's territory, and you don't want it to be blocked by this pawn. So you get your pieces out and you get your bishop out, and once they make a move, you get your queen up. And look at this: you can castle on the king side, or you can castle. Castle on the king side, or you can castle on the queen side. It's up to you. Now, if you want to have a more sharp game with a little more stuff going on, then you castle the opposite side. If they castle king side, you castle queen. If you castle the opposite side of your opponent, you'll have a game that's a little sharper. However, if you have a pawn storm going on, and you can see that your opponent is moving their pawns, then you don't want to castle on that side. You'd rather castle on the other side. Then, of course, if they have all their pieces lined up on your protected squares in front of your king, then you wouldn't want to castle on that side. So you just make a decision based on the tactics and based on the way the game is going, which side you want to castle on. And this is a great time to give you the idea that if you like these chess tips and they're helping you and you think you'd like more of these chess tips, please subscribe, hit that notification bell to get more chess tips to pole vault your game into the very next level. The next chess tip we're going to look at is to try to prevent your opponent from castling. If you can make it where your opponent can't castle, then you make it more powerful for you and less safe for your opponent. Queen's pawns are out, then you go offer the gambit, the e pawn to e4, and then when they move up, you move one more. Well, it's a pretty standard opening so far. They get their bishop out, they take and you take. They get their knight out, you get your knight out, and then if you advance your pawn to a4, well, your next move can be your bishop to a3. And so when you move your bishop here to a3, you're looking right to that square, and that square keeps it from castling. They can't castle across check. Can't do that. So they can't castle. That lets you develop your pieces more, make more determinations. If they get frustrated and try to castle on the other side, they've got to have 3 pieces moved out of the way. And right now, where this knight would like to go. So there's a lot of things that keep them from going exactly where they would like to. They can't get this out and put that knight there, for example. They have to move this pawn, and that pawn's in the way. Just a lot of things that keep them from castling on the other side. So when you can keep your opponent from castling, you've done a great thing. Next, we want to look at dominate as much territory as possible. Keep it in the back of your mind. Keep yourself thinking about it, that you want to dominate. You want to have as many squares under your control as you possibly can. So we're just going to get a few pieces out. We get the Queen's Gambit, and then they get their pawns out, and you have your pawns just one step ahead of your opponent's pawns. That's it. But look at the difference. Your opponent has visibility with this, the dark squared bishop and the queen. That's it. The white bishop is blocked. So, but you have visibility with your queen all the way to h5. The dark squared colored bishop goes all the way to h6. And then the white squared bishop goes all the way to a6. That's a lot of squares. Of course, then you also have the squares that are controlled by your pawns. Of course, both sides have the same pawns. But that's what you have, where your opponent has fewer squares under their control. So you want to be sure that you control as many squares as possible. Now, those are the tips. And here's the scenario. Recognize this pattern. When you see this pattern, you know that you can win the queen. But you have to initiate it. You have to start the pawns moving. So once you get your bishop out, which is a very normal move, they're not going to suspect anything. And they make their pawn. And now you can wait and let them initiate the trade. That's not the same thing. You want to initiate the trade. You trade, they trade, and now we have visibility to the queen. So they might think, well, I'm going to take my queen, or they're going to block the queen, whatever they want to do. But instead, you take your bishop and put the king in check. So we moved our bishop here, and we're putting the king in check, and the king has to move. So the king will take the bishop, and at that point, you take their queen, and you win a queen, and you're totally winning the game. Thank you.